Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Eclipse. Today we're doing episode 9, and with me as always, I have the DM, V.
Hello.
And yeah, today we're doing episode 9, The Rooms, which is an hour and a half, and there's a lot of stuff in there, and I already trimmed my notes a little bit to not make this episode super fucking long, because I didn't want to have to split it up. So there may be some outstanding questions, some things that the characters say that we don't address this time around, and that is very much intentional. We're leaving something for future episodes.
Yeah, when the episode started, we were like, oh, it's an hour and a half. Oh.
Uh-oh.
Oopsie doodle.
Yeah. So let me read the recap real quick.
Oh, no.
Welcome back, adventurers, to The Lucky Die. Previously, Balance finds a metal key. Super metal key. Raljak is blinded by the lights, and Sultana stands by her position as a woman of God. Having met Guardians and Claw, the trio hand over the keys and start the challenges to raise a hero. Who will be the first into the dark corridor? What twisted horrors await within? And will our criminals leave this dark place unscathed? I guess we're about to find out. Welcome back to The Lucky Die.
As read by a younger version of Squash.
Younger, more British version, I think. I don't know. I don't know if I did any British at that.
I don't think so. It sounded so Squash to me.
The episode starts out pretty simply. We are faced with a corridor with 3 doors on the left, 3 doors on the right, and the doors right in front of us, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. And they start off arguing within themselves, and then they decide to all right, we're gonna go for a door, and you say okay, yeah, they're we're gonna go for the door on the left. Can you describe it to me? The door is made of, and there's a good green. 3-second pause. There is a green door, and I don't know why it cracked me up so much.
That was me trying to figure out what's the most important point and what the door was made of, because all I had written down was green door, black door, and red door. I was like, what is the door? I'm like, oh no, it's made of... Oh, why did I start like that? And then just have to start again.
Neil edited this for me. Neil did not edit it for her.
Neil did not do this. I think that's also mentioned as a half joke in this. How much of this am I going to cut out? None is the answer.
Yeah, that was very late in the episode. There are a couple of jokes about that. So we have the team kind of arguing about the door, and I was kind of surprised. I had completely forgotten the title Lord of the Door was not proclaimed by our dear Sultana as she busts down some doors. It was bestowed upon her by a man, I'm not going to say whimpering or cowering, but standing behind her, at least.
Yes. Master of the Doors, Lord of the Doors. It's a name that has a murky origin, I guess.
Balance kind of just checks that title at Sultana and asks her to open the door for them. Mm-hmm.
Again, sticking to character of not being the first person through the door, not being the person who leads from the front, rather leads from behind. So I'm glad that he keeps sticking to his character. He definitely evolves out of this eventually, but it's good to see that he sticks with that. It's a very difficult thing to roleplay, and I appreciate that he does that.
Yeah. So they pass through the green door, and inside the room there's a pool of water with stones in a circle, making a circle in the middle. And they get asked, show me what peace is. Yep. Now, first question, how much of that was planned? What are you thinking when you're DMing this?
I actually have some pretty good notes back from this recording session, from the moment that they entered the temple to the end of the mirror visions. That's all one recorded session. That's all one big block of notes. And I actually have the notes about the Green Room because I think, as I mentioned last Beyond the Eclipse, the keys, the rooms, the positions, they're all very tied together. So I had to have them each by block. So I have the block here for it. Notes about the Green Room. They're all blinded by a DC 18 con check, which I think I forget, and they are teleported to a large white space with a shaft of yellow light, each to express peace in a single action or single word. DC 14/16 for persuasion or performance or whatever they can get away with. Radiant damage for those who fail. That's the only notes I have about this particular room.
You did blind them when they entered the room.
I did, but it was going to be a con check, but I forget.
Yeah, you just blind them, and Neil just goes like, "Oh, fantastic! I love being blinded by doors. This is my favorite new status effect."
Yep.
So, you tell the team like, what was the phrase? Show me what peace is, and Sultana kind of like runs in there and starts praying to Tyr, and. I think this is not the first time you do it, but this is one of the earliest times you do it. You tell them to, like, tell me what role you're gonna use. Like, justify it to me. I think I mentioned it in the last or 2 episodes ago where that was the first one you do that to. And Casey is caught absolutely by surprise. And I think you did it to Casey last time, too. I think both times Casey's like, you're supposed to tell me what to roll, you fucker. Who's DMing who right now?
Yeah, I think that's just partly A, because I'm kind of lazy, and B, like, it helps develop your character if you decide what this is. And this is another one of those beautiful puzzles that I write where I don't have a set way of winning this. Like, the winning is just show me peace. What does peace mean to you and your character? What is this? Also, I didn't want to have 3 rooms of combat, so I was like, oh, fuck this. So I need to do something a little bit more esoteric. But yeah, like the whole the space itself, the ring of stones, the water in it, like that's not in my notes at all. That came from the fact that someone reminded me that it was the waterfall that was in there. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll use that. And you know, I didn't have the voice in there, and then after we got in there, I'm like, how am I going to tell them to do this? Oh, I'll have a beautiful ethereal voice. I didn't know who that was. If they were going to push it, I'd have to make it up. It was all improv. But yeah, that was just what it was. That was just my bare ass notes for that.
Who are you, Mr. Voice? What's your name and what's your backstory?
Yes, I will figure that out. Get back to me.
Yeah, so we have Sultana pray to Tyr to get themselves out of the room, and they just kind of evaporate, and Neil, ever the pessimist, oh great, she's dead.
Yeah, beautiful.
And then we have Raoul, and I'll admit, I don't remember exactly what he tries first. I think he's just trying to, like, find a Zen, and he fails and takes radiant damage, and he kind of stumbles at that point. And I was genuinely kind of taken aback that we're only on episode 9. You guys have been playing together for about 8 hours at this point, like, I'll give you that. But the interaction between Raoul and Balance at that moment are really, really good. I think that they bring out good in each other. I think Neil came to Arch asking for help.
Yes.
I think Neil opened up a thing for Arch to work in, and as Arch's character, Balance, is supposed to be really zen, supposed to be very balanced, supposed to know how to meditate and all that good stuff. I think it gave... There's a little trick to elves, and it is the fact that they've had decades to do things that most races only have a year to do. Yeah. And I think it's kind of nice to see somebody who had to spend 50 years to figure out how to fucking meditate on his own just kind of bestow some of that to Raoul, who probably has like an idea and all the good, knows how to do it, but like just having a little bit of a guiding hand, somebody who has experience.
Yeah, I was really glad to see them roleplay together. I was very happy about it. That means that I can just sit back for a while and just listen to them and fill in the world as how they want it to be filled in. But also, it was just good to see the characters getting on together. I know you just mentioned that we'd only been roleplaying in this podcast for about 8, maybe 9 hours together. But Neil, Arch, and I had already been on a former podcast, and the 4 of us, including Casey, we'd already done some weekend roleplay stuff together, which we were streaming at the time. So we'd actually all been role-playing together for quite a while at this point. It was just nice to see them just take the reins and go with it, and I'm really glad they took the direction that they did, because it allowed me to drop some of those backstory memories, which obviously I didn't have this prepared when they started. I love being able to drop that. I know enough about both their past that I could drop in memories of Ama. I like being able to eventually, when Raoul gets to show his piece and be at peace, when Laffian does the same, getting to show a bit more about Nimverna and all of her character and her little mischievous behavior. That all comes from those two dropping really good roleplay to start with, and it gives me time to come up with those when they decide to do it. I enjoyed those two role-playing together a lot. Like, I also like Sultana's directness. Oh, peace? Yeah, pretty tear. Nice.
It's God, right? Yeah, God.
God, right?
Bring
Yeah,
God into this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty good. Yeah, and Balance and Raoul both kind of just find inner peace, just center themselves around their memories and their loved ones, and that's where they get out. And it's a simple little room. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said I can't have 3 rooms of fighting.
Yep.
You don't do riddles a lot. You're not a fan of structured puzzles like a riddle or something like that.
No, because I am really bad at answering riddles anyway. I think setting them for someone else, if they come up with an idea different from what my own is, there may end up being like massive arguments about it. And it does sometimes rely on the other person knowing the riddle or being able to be good at riddles. Your character might be good at riddles, but if I drop a riddle in there and you as the player can't solve it, but your character would, it just comes down to a dice roll, and I don't find that particularly interesting either. So I tend to do, if I do verses or riddles and stuff, it's more like warnings than, how'd you solve this riddle of, and the answer is water. Like how I'm shy at those. I'm shy at writing those, so I prefer to like do like warnings as stuff.
Yeah, I get you. I know a lot of people love riddles and love having puzzles in their games, and I tip my hat to those who enjoy that stuff, because it's not... I enjoy it, but I also get super frustrated when I'm playing like a intelligence 20, wisdom 20, like through it, and my character can't figure out the fucking puzzle. I'm sitting there like, I'm stupid. My character is not stupid.
Yeah.
I'm going insane.
And there's also some puzzles and some layouts that just wouldn't work necessarily in an audio format. Like, here are all of these things, and if actually all these individual things, and actually when you take a step back and look at them, they make a bigger picture. You can't do that in audio. Like that just that's just not a fucking thing. So you have to be a little bit careful on some of the puzzles I set. So I personally love anagrams. I love doing that kind of stuff. I love hiding things in the background, but I can't do that in an audio format. That's just not doable. So I just try and avoid those ones that rely a lot on sight and basic, like riddles and puzzles. Those are bad for me. The things I'm good and happy at don't work well in a podcast. So
and I think the interaction between the characters were really good in that scene, and I think the like just a little tip of the hat to Arch for his description of how Raoul was supposed to, like, what was it, like, feel the light reflecting of your skills and stuff like that, and I was just like, oh, it's actually like I don't know if somebody had used phrasing like that earlier in the episode or earlier in the session, but if not, like, tips of the hat to like Arch for good phrasing, good like vocabulary. Vocabulary. Good job saying vocabulary. Yeah, and then when the team exit the room, there's a tiny little interaction where Balance just kind of, like, Raoul just kind of goes to Balance like, hey, thanks for that. Thanks for helping me a little bit there. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot.
It's the beginning of what we call friendship.
Oh. And once they're done with that, they move on to the room across the hall, which you affectionately called the meditation room or the prayer room or something like that?
This one's called the temple room, yeah. So the meditation room is the room they just left, which becomes the unofficial official meeting room in the end. Every time they went into that room, I didn't want them to see the blinding white light again and have to do peace again to get out. No, like the room changes and it's just like a room with tables and chairs and stuff. But yeah, the room opposite being like the temple room. I made this room. Obviously, I'd made this, like, the temple set out itself, the temple, Fasten for Sim, to be, here's your challenge, here's your reward, here's your challenge, here's your reward. And to have the rewards be a place where they could make a base, being that the gods had set this up so that, if the great hero has to be brought back to life or reassembled, there is clearly something going on, and, you know, armies and lots of people and logistics are going to be needed. So you're going to need things like, you know, temples for people to find their religious faith, no matter what denomination they are, for people to be able to train and make stuff, for people to be able to rest. So that's why each of these puzzles had something that would unlock a bigger part of the base, shall we say. And yeah, the temple room, I just always wanted to be fairly basic and something that would change with the needs of the user, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And then the characters enter the temple room, and of course, Sultana, being the Lord of the Doors, barges in and sees a shrine to Tyr. Does a little prayer, leaves a little coin, and then walks out. And then Art just like, you can hear Art's kind of like stumbling as he's like, wait, what is my god? What is happening? what are we going to do here? I've never imagine my character as a religious character. They're very cerebral, so why would they have a god? So he kind of throws the ball at you, doesn't he?
Yep, that's fun. I like the fact that Casey was like, I know what their god is already. I'm like, I think you're right. I think Neil cut out a whole bit of me bringing out the handbook, flicking through, trying to find a god. So we were just riffing random shit. So I think a bunch of stuff gets cut out here. And then you hear, like, ooh. I can hear, like, oh, and I've restarted there. I don't think anyone else can really pick it up because I try to keep the same tone from before if I remember it. But yeah, there was a definite moment of me looking through the handbook. And as I'm looking through the handbook, I'm like, all right, if they're asking me about Lathians, they're going to ask about Raoul's too. So at the same time, I'm also looking for Raoul's potential god, someone who would oversee them, I guess. If the worst came to the worst, so
release the uncut version. Release the uncut version. No. I can hear the cries.
Like, props to Casey. Like I mentioned this before. I'm kind of really shit at the whole like D&D lore thing, and the fact that I have players on board who are like, oh, I know what god this would be. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go check it out. Yep, 100%. We'll go with that option.
Yeah. So you end up dropping what was it, Ogma?
Ogma
balance.
Because
Ogma is the god of
knowledge. It kind of made the most sense going through it, and Arch was like, this could be a plot point. I'm like, of course it's going to be a plot point. If you all make me do stuff, of course I'm going to be a plot point eventually. So yeah, and he goes in, he sees the scrolls, he sees all the work, and it's all good. Like I can play with this. And then he does something I don't expect, which is like leaving a small coin on the altar. And as he walks away, my brain is like, all right, this is the plot point. This is the blessing of Ogma. I know what this is going to be. And this still hasn't come up yet. We're like 197, 198-ish episodes in recording, and it still hasn't come up yet. There's a very specific means in which this will activate. The same way that Squash's blessing of Ilmater happened only under very specific circumstances. So he still has it. I don't know if it will ever be resolved. I don't know if it will ever come up. But if it doesn't, and we eventually do a wrap-up AMA, this will be one question I answer.
Yes. All right. Good. Blessing of Ogma. Somebody write that in the AMA chat question.
I'm really bad at writing notes in game as we're going through, and it's something I'm trying to get better at, but I still suck. I'm not going to lie. At the very bottom of this like 4-page set of notes I have for this recording session, there are 2 lines: blessing of Ogma for balance, and then underneath in all caps. Actually, I'll tell you when we get to that part. Remind me when we get to the mirrors what the second note is.
All right. I'm reminded of a meme with this like a god character going like, I hope somebody was writing down that because I made it all up. No, I have to leave now. I have to write all this shit down because I'm not going to remember it tomorrow.
Yep. That meme is me a lot, especially because I get asked random questions and I don't want to have to look through my notes necessarily, or I haven't written down my thought processes for stuff. So I'm like, I'll make it up and I'll deal with some of it later. And then I'm like, I have to write these notes down before I go to sleep. But of course, it's usually 4 or 5 in the morning when we're recording this. So the notes don't get written down. I just have to remember them.
Not really. I'm very scared. I haven't DM'd in probably close to a decade now. And I'm very, very busy nowadays and have a lot of things occupying my mind. Back when I used to DM a bunch, like I didn't have that much occupying my mind. I was just doing like basic schoolwork or basic work. So I'm worried now because I love improving and making shit up on the spot. And I have like when I used to DM, I had sparse notes like you mentioned that you do. I have a feeling that I'm going to be a shit DM today because I'm not going to have the brain capacity to remember all the bullshit I make up, and I'm not good at making my own notes.
I used to be really good at remembering the bits from session to session, especially like particular phrases. Like I would remember them, like the way that I described Odette's death, like the specific way of like a head cracking and whipping from one side to the other and crack. I would remember those from session to session. I wouldn't write them down. And it's not anything I was like, oh, I'll rely on my memory. Like it's just something I did. And I was just okay with that. But now as I've gotten older, it's much harder for me to retain that knowledge. And I just go to these things like, I don't remember doing this. I don't remember what this means. Yeah. I don't know any of this. So yeah, it's gotten harder the older I've gotten. I'm not going to lie. So I'm going to have to start making more notes. Because this is what,
it's only going to get harder.
Years, I think, since we started this. So it's been a while.
Yeah. And then once Balance has had his Ogma revelation, we have Ral enter the room.
Yeah.
And I was very entertained by this scene.
The whole, there's a torture rack in front of you. I'm like, yeah, clearly it's going to be, isn't it?
And you have Ral back out of the room scared, and to hear, like, you of course have to drop or like explain to the rest of the team, like 100%, like, yeah, that's Ilmater's symbolism.
Yeah.
Iconography. And to hear the two of them motivate him to like to like try to incentivize him to go back in was really fun. Like to hear the characters do it. Nobody was like, I pushed my character pushes him back in. Like my character tells him it's Ilmater. All of them are in character.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the characters are in character and they're enticing him back. They're bargaining with him to go back. Like, Sultana's like, please, I just want to see Ilmater's iconography again. Like, this means a lot to me that I'm traveling with somebody who prays to the same god as my girlfriend, like, my wife. Yeah. And I just, it's a really good scene. Like, I'm shocked there wasn't music underneath it. That's all I'll say.
There was music underneath. It wasn't underneath their role playing, but there was music in there. Because I have a note in here that the shift from dark, when we're talking about there being a rack in the room, to an explanation from Zoltana what this is, like the music shifts from dark to something light.
What?
Yeah, something really foreboding underneath that description, and it shifts to something lighter. Because I have a note in here: music shift from dark to light was glorious, Neil.
I usually write down when music starts. I'm disappointed in my notes. I may have pruned them too hard.
Yeah, I didn't know they'd gravitate so hard in this room. It's one of those things like, yeah, there's a temple room where people can pray there, yada yada yada. But there was no yada yada yada. There was in depth. There was like, oh, holy shit, okay. And as we hear in the rest of the series, it does become a bit more of a thing. So yeah, it's one of those, like, I wasn't prepared for what they wanted to do in here. Obviously, I didn't have things like blessings ready for them. I didn't 100% decide what the blessing was when I bestowed it. I had to write that down, like, I think 3 or 4 days later when I'd solidified in my mind exactly what it was. So yeah, like, it's one of those like, oh, here's the black and white cookie cutter character, and here's a really in-depth like edgelord, and they look after the cookie cutter character. I'm like, all right, okay, cool. This is exactly one of those moments.
Let me flesh out the gremlin that I made up randomly.
Let me flesh out the receptionist who just sits there and chews gum. Oh shit.
Well, the receptionist is important. So they move on from just trying to explain to him and entice him back into the room. They try to teach him how to pray.
Yeah.
And we'll definitely get back on this note a little bit later, but it is very clear, and Neil is good at like communicating it. The Dragonborns do not have gods. They do not pray. And I love that. That is so fucking like character, like it makes sense. Again, we get more into the Dragonborn lore later, but I love the little hint bits and tidbits of drops there.
Yeah, and also the idea that they have no concept really of a proper afterlife, and we definitely get this to a bit later on. But yeah, a lot of how the Dragonborn are fleshed out really were days of conversation between Neil and I on Skype at the time, I think it was. But a lot of actually what they ended up being just came out of Neil's improvising in the moment. His decision and what his character was doing. A lot of the Dragonborn come from that. Now, some of it obviously I have to countermand, but this is his experience of it. So I'm like, yeah, this is what you believe and feel, but this is not necessarily true. And I try to always be upfront with him about it when that comes to that. But yeah, generally speaking, almost all the Dragonborn just came from their culture and their ways. A good portion of it came from Neil. So this is one of those examples.
Yeah. And I just want to, like, it's not a direct quote, but it's basically what Neil said. I couldn't be pausing and playing a lot while making the notes. That's a little rule I've made. At the end, Neil says something along the lines of, he stops praying. What does he say? He's been told this is a positive experience and he's trying to believe that.
Yeah.
He said something like that.
Yeah, he basically says that he's believing what he's being told. This is a good thing.
Yes. And it's something about the phrasing there and like the character we've been introduced over the last 8 episodes, this kind of negative beliefs kind of in the bad of humanity and man and just like the basics of people just being a little bit cruel and selfish. And this time he's just kind of like, yeah, I kind of want to believe what you guys are telling me, and it's a huge hint towards his character's future goals and motivations. It's later on we will get a big old push from Raoul about afterlives, and it's a very cool one. It's a very cool one. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to mention about this room, or?
Nope.
All right, then we'll move to the battle room. Had to have, if you have 3 rooms, there has to be a fight in one of them. And I was writing other notes. I was thinking about the motivations and things that had happened in the past room, and then they go to the red door, and I'm not paying as much attention. I'm thinking about my notes, and I just like, they're in a room. There's a rope circle and 6 armors. I'm like, what?
3.
All right, 3. No, wasn't there 6 armors?
3.
Really? Oh,
3 armors.
And they're just almost instantly in a fight. And it's just like, okay, okay. We're in this room now.
Yep. My notes for the red room are as follows. A straight-up fight between the group and an enchanted suit of armor. Armor, number, height point number +3 to attack, and certain amount of hammer damage. That's the notes I had for this room. That's it. I didn't know there was going to be a rope circle. I didn't mean to say there were going to be 3 suits of armor. My mouth just opened and out came 3 suits of armor. Yeah, I just knew this was just going to be your basic standard fight with a lot of damage coming out from the suit if it was possible to lay it down. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a simple room. I will admit, though, there was a small part of me that was like, balance, you bitch. When, like, throughout this episode, you've been hearing Raoul warm up to Balance and trust his word and his wisdom a lot more, and he's like guiding him. And then Balance just goes like, Raoul, why did you step into the circle? And I'm like, motherfucker! Like he's trying his best to trust you, and you're just like, I'm not even gonna tell you what's gonna happen or what I think is gonna happen. Why don't you just step into the circle? It's like, you fuck.
Yeah. This is also one of those little fuck-uppies from me where I was like, as soon as someone steps into the circle, the fight was just going to start. And I just completely missed that Sultana had walked in there. Even though I think I'd made the joke about Sultana having been in there, my brain was like, yeah, I know where everybody is. I'm going to start the fight when this happens. But I was probably distracted by something going on. And my brain just didn't click in time. So that was kind of my bad.
Well, it happens, and you can absolutely hear the kind of stumbling and trying to figure it out as you're like, all right, wait, okay, so Raoul, I need you to roll initiative, and then Balance is like, do I need to roll? It's like, anybody not in the fight doesn't really need to roll, so Raoul, roll. And then Sultana's like, I need to roll initiative too. What? Are you in the... Okay, everybody just roll initiative. And I had the...
Yeah, that moment really solidified my brain. If there's initiative, make everyone roll, even if they're in it or not. Because at some point, someone will be like, I want to come and join the fight. And then you have to roll and get them involved. And like, bollocks to it. So yeah, I think that was definitely a solid moment in my brain of like, this you should learn from. Ding. I don't think I do 100%, but I'm pretty sure I do it from this point.
Nobody is 100%. But yes, that is like, absolutely. Like, if there are 2 people having a duel, make everybody roll initiative, and then if people want to do actions, they have to do it on their initiative or have to prepare it or like just it's always such a fucky.
Yeah. So, yeah, the fight is just what the fight is. Plenty of damage laid out on all sides. And then the fight is very rapidly over because, as everyone knows, I'm not a huge fan of fights. And I... at the end, they have Raoul go in and get the coin or whatever it is. And at that point, I'm just messing with Neil. I hadn't intended to have 2 extra suits of armor in this room. I hadn't intended to have anything in this room. I just wrote down what I wrote. So the idea that every time he moved, these statues or these suits of armor were watching him, it just made me laugh, making Raoul uncomfortable. So I did that. That just made me laugh. So that's why I did it. There was no deeper meaning here. There was no other fight plan. It was just, that's what I was doing because it was fun.
People ask if God could be real, why he's so sadistic. This is why, because it's fun to fuck with people. In the fight, there are two notes I have. It is bring down the holy thunder, ! Exclamation mark, ! Exclamation mark. And then just the stray crit that scared the bejesus out of the team.
Yep.
They go and they pick up the red coin. Raoul picks up the red coin, and then they sprint out the door. And I just have a little note saying, so many doors ajar in quotation marks, because I think you say the door across is ajar, both doors down
the door opposite becomes ajar when they defeat the creature. So all the doors opposite are left slightly ajar whenever those doors are opened. Otherwise, they're all closed until the tasks are completed.
And they decide to enter the room straight across. I just
want to say one thing about the Enchanted Armor Room. After I decided there were going to be 2 more suits of armor, like I did with all the other rooms, I know what's in there now. Just nobody's ever gone back into those rooms.
Nobody's gone back into the Enchanted Armor Room?
I think they went back into Enchanted Armor Room with big spoilers if you haven't got to the end of season 1 for Caden.
Why are you listening to this? Right.
Because it's a peaceful room. But there are other things in that room that have yet to be interacted with. They may not have purposes. Just no one's gone back in there. And no one's got back into the death chair room either. Oh, no, they did. They went back into the death chair room too. If you haven't reached the end of season 1, spoilers.
Stop it.
That's where they take the prisoner that was trying to assassinate Laffian. Again, the death chair has a thing for it now, but nobody's sat in it, so yeah.
So they leave the Enchanted Warrior room, the Enchanted Armor room, and they go across the room, a hall into the blacksmith room. Now, almost nothing happens in this room. You're just kind of dropping, there's everything you need to make armors.
Yeah, everything you need, basically blacksmithing, herbalization, training room, basically whatever they'd need to prepare themselves or prepare their followers. It made sense that, hey, if there's an army, they're going to need things like swords. If there's an army, they're going to need things like healing potions. And they're going to need to practice and train, and that's what this room is. I just smashed them both into the same room. When I had originally conceived, this particular Falsum Facium is actually almost a direct rip from a previous game I played, where there were 4 doors because there were 4 people. And this room was actually in 2. But when I reconfigured everything for TLD for the podcast, I was like, no, I'm going to smash them both into the same room. It doesn't need to be separated. I don't want to have a 4th thing happening here. It just seems unnecessary. So I'm just going to smash them into the same room, and it kind of functions now. So that kind of, I think, on reflection, is better in the end. But nothing really happens here apart from them trying to see if they can forge and make potions. Nope, that's not what's here. It's just things, guys, just things.
I was gonna ask, you seem a little bit hesitant when people start talking about using stuff for knowing blacksmithing, and I was wondering if you would have considered if Casey had just decided, nope, Sultana learned blacksmithing when she was a kid. 100%.
That wasn't in the notes.
No, you cannot overwrite this.
That wasn't in the prep. I would, no, if someone had really come up with a legitimate reason, hey, so I've done this and I would have done that and I think I would have done this. If they come up with a legitimate thought process and reasoning, then yeah. However, we know that Laffian has spent the last 50 years in prison, and before that was learning to become an inquisitor, learning to do magic, and learning how to do blacksmithing, and learning how to do this and that. And that's that's a jack of all trades, and you specifically focus on something. Sultana, again, they all would have had challenges to convince me that this was the case. But if they'd done it, then sure, they could have used this stuff. And they can still learn how to use it. So, yeah, it's there.
And then they look around, and you kind of drop a hint that the armors and like the making of much of the items are from across the world.
Yep.
Again, like this city was built before the really like cutting of the continents.
Yeah.
And then they steal the ruby wand. Put that one in the memory bank for about 30 episodes from now.
The origin of the ruby encrusted wand. Yes. I thought it was really sweet that Sultana wanted to get something for Demi to look at. Like, hey, this might be interesting for you. This is a beautiful origin. And I'm like, all right, I will give you a wand and it has rubies on it. Nailed it. And I will make that future V's problem. Or alternatively, it's one of those like, oh, I can turn this into a lore dump if I want to.
Yeah.
It is possible for, like, for example, like, you know, if they've given it to Demi could have seen it, read it, decided something about it, and I could have dropped some sort of lore about the world or some sort of plot point. I could use this as a tool. But as it was, it didn't get dropped for ages and ages and ages, and I forgot where it came from. So when eventually she sees it, it's like, oh, it's cute and nice, and I love it. Oh, hey, Squash, can you hold on to this because I ain't got no effing pockets? It became something else because I had decided to use it as a tool later on. Because obviously this isn't something I had planned. I could have, but it wasn't. That's not the intent of this room. So, yeah.
I get you. And I just thought that a more cynical player would have been annoyed that they're like in this room, they're looking around, and then one character goes like, I want to get a gift for an NPC. And the game master goes, oh, there's a clearly valuable item here. It's like, hey.
I made it very clear that those rubies were not worth anything.
Okay.
So the same way that industrial rubies and emeralds and sapphires aren't worth anything, they're just useful when you're doing, like, you know, stuff in industry. So yeah, that's just what these are.
All right. And then they leave the blacksmith room, the training room, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And they go to the black door.
Yes.
And this room has now been dubbed Death Chair Room.
Yeah.
They enter a room, and in it there's just this like spooky looking throne. How would you describe it?
It's just a chair. It's just a basic ass chair with something like carved onto it. That was it. The notes I had were, it is a small room, like all the rooms, barely bigger than a closet. There is a single chair. The chair has one thing written upon it. The chair is for those already in my domain. And necrotic damage for anyone who sits in it who isn't dead. And I decided to leave this open as to how they wanted to explore it. Because the puzzle was, this is a chair for dead things. That was the puzzle. Like, just put something dead in there, or, you know, if you want to sit in there, you'll take necrotic damage, and then that's kind of it. Like, that was the puzzle.
Have class sit on it.
Yeah, have something dead sit in this chair, or something dead in this chair, and you would eventually get the coin. The fact that Neil came up with an explanation, I'm like, all right, then that's what this is going to be. And it means that I can drop something about his lore if he's the one that thinks he should only sit in this chair because he's the closest to death. I'm like, that's a perfect explanation. Great, I can suddenly drop this whole new bunch of lore on him, which I had not prepped at all.
I have some questions. Before we move on from on to Neil actually sitting on the chair, Raul sitting on the chair, I have a question about Monarch and balance.
Yes.
So they're making jokes about the chair. Sultana talks about the fact that like all of them are half dead because they got hung, so they should sit with one butt cheek on it. It's like a little bit of like joking, and there's some joking, and they're like kind of idea crafting. And then Arch asks, "Hey, wouldn't Monarch technically count as dead because he doesn't have a body? Like he is technically just a spirit."
Yeah.
So he asks Monarch, "Hey, would you count as dead?" And Monarch replies something along the lines, and again, I do not have it verbatim. "I don't feel dead. I may not have a body, but I could have control of one if I wanted to."
Yes.
And I was shocked that you guys blazed over that, because from my point of view, that was Monarch holding a gun going, "Try me, motherfucker, try me."
It kind of was. So Monarch could have various points taken over control of Laffian's body. And I think in one point he does, but to help him. At this point, Marnik was still a question mark as to whether he would be with or against them in the final fight that's coming. So at this point, he still is a threat to Laffian. He still is a dark influence, shall we say. So it is he could take control if he wanted. Like, he could just do it. I mean, he's sharing this body with you. He's had 5,000 years to figure out how to do this shit. That's a possibility for him. But it kind of gets skipped over. But in my mind, Marnik isn't dead. He's just a spirit that's moving on and on and on. He has yet to meet his spectre, shall we say.
All right. Yeah, and then eventually Ral comes up with a conclusion. I have been closest to death. I should sit in a chair. Yep. And plops his taily butt on the chair and gets taken to Sepia World.
Yes.
Where we finally meet the Spectre.
Yes.
Now, first question.
Yes.
Just before we go anywhere else. Spectre.
Yes.
Did you come up with this? Is this a reference? What are you thinking there?
So I always had spectres in my notes, and I always knew that there would be death following Raljak around. That's just something I knew. I didn't know that they'd meet him so quickly. I didn't know that this would be the moment. But the spectres have always kind of been in there. They've been the shepherds of the underworld, so to speak. And the idea specifically for the spectres came from a series called His Dark Materials by Paul something. I forgot his name. His Dark Materials, which has the golden compass in it and the subtle knife and something else. Anyway, in that book, Lyra and the boy meet their death. They meet their deaths. They just go to the underworld and physically meet their death. And the death is like an old friend, somebody they know, someone who isn't scary, someone who shepherds them to the ferryman, who then takes them onto the land of the dead. And I love that imagery so much. I love the idea that, individual deaths exist for every person and that they are helpful and nice and kind in the hardest moments. So I decided that's what the spectres were going to be. They were going to be along those lines, except that not everybody has an individual death and that death has many clients, shall we say. And I didn't want to call them Reapers because you hear Reapers all the time, so I called them Spectres. There was nothing really more than that. So I decided
if you called them Reapers, you would have had to license out Seasons of Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Club, and that would have been a cheap joke. I kind of always knew it was there, but I didn't know that they'd interact with it this session. I didn't know that it was the Reaper was going to, the Spectre was going to, I've got it stuck in my head now, that the Spectre was going to have spoken with Ama. I didn't know all those things were going to happen in this. I just wanted to be able to use this as a good excuse to do a little bit more lore dumping, a little bit more interaction with the world. And that came from me not sticking to put something dead in the chair. I like their explanation of what should be going in there so much. I'm like, no, I'm going to go with it. This is what the solution is. This gives me a chance to do something else. So that's what I went with. Fun fact, I don't know what that Spectre's voice sounds like. No idea. I still don't know. Neil put effects on it, and I've never gone back to listen to my recording of this episode because it makes no sense because it's just me talking as a local recording. I don't know what the original voice is, which is why every single time I speak as the Spectre, it sounds something different on our end.
You have been so close to death for a very, very long time. You intrigue me the way you keep putting it off. I have been following you because you should have died many times. You haven't. And I have been following you because not a lot of people get away from the Spectres.
I have no idea.
That's because time is convoluted on this docking plane, and the Spectre lives many lifetimes in between meetings.
Yes, and he has many throat infections like current me.
Okay, so that answers a bunch of questions I had for the Spectres, but I'm gonna go through them, a couple of them, because I just want to hear the specific answers.
Okay, yeah.
The first one is that you say you get the feeling you've known them for a long time, a friend you can't place, a friendly face. did you mean for Raoul to ever have seen his spectre, or was this more quoting? Because you almost literally just said that line again earlier.
Yeah, I had always intended that he'd eventually meet his spectre.
No. Had he, without knowing, you deciding in the background of the backstory that at some point Raoul had met his spectre?
No.
But he didn't remember?
Not really. So he might have glimpsed him, like, you know, through the death haze. He may have glimpsed a shadowy figure, but not ever enough to have seen exactly what his spectre looks like, or to know that she definitely is a presence, a person, more just like an ethereal thought.
Okay, I get you. Yeah, you basically answered that earlier. Like, this is more what you want the specters to be, not that there was a special case in Rouse. Then you run around. A couple of jokes are said to the specter. I don't have a 9 to 5. Blah blah blah. Yep. And then you drop the joke. There is no paperwork in this world or in this line of work. And I instantly go like, You introduce the god of paperwork later, like you.
Yeah, so there's a goddess of paperwork. There's a goddess of paperwork later on, but like the Reaper. Yeah. Sorry, See, I'm stuck with Reapers now. I've said it. There's why I'm afraid.
Not my fault.
Sticking on making sure they're called specters. For making sure that the specters themselves, they don't do paperwork. They just do what they're told. Like they don't fill in reports. That's Lathian's specter's problem, or not, as it may now be. So yeah, there's no real paperwork for them to do. It's like you get given like an assignment and you go do it. So there's no paperwork for them.
And then the Reaper kind of blasé says, the Spectre says in a kind of blasé way, if you were anyone else, I would have surely reaped them where you sat. Yeah. Again, like this is the necrotic damage. That's the kind of thing you're referencing there.
Yeah.
Then at the end of that, he returns to the real world. The team kind of harasses Raoul until he actually tells them what happens. Neil is keeping it really close to the chest, and the team's like, "You're gonna tell us? You're gonna tell us everything, you fucker! You fuck."
Neil, the ever helpful. But I think that's Raoul just trying to absorb what he's just seen, because he's now had to confront the idea that there is a death. That's not really a thing that he knew about, so this is all weirdly new for him. And
then they leave. They get the black coin.
Yep.
And then they leave to the next room, I think.
Yep.
I
want to mention that the interactivity after this just makes me crack up a lot, which is Casey's the broad you killed in such a deadpan delivery.
Ooh,
when Raoul mentions about having like his Spectre had mentioned Amon, and I don't know, it made me laugh so much. And the fact that they rag on Raoul for being on Neil for being so negative about Raoul, and how Raoul doesn't deserve Neil's negativity. I'm dying. I'm just dying over this side.
That was actually kind of the interaction between the team at that point is very, very entertaining. And then you kind of leave that room and you go to the room across, which is the bunkers room, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the barracks.
Yeah, the barracks. And I am mad at myself right now because I don't remember exactly what the situation was. You're trying to say the word integrate.
Yeah,
integrate.
I still can't say it.
And you stumble over it and you say intercrit. And then you just stumble as you're trying to say something that looks very nice.
Yep.
And you just go, it's very complicated patterns are there.
Yes, and it's complex and beautiful, which I think is intricate. I can't say it without stopping. Yeah. So I was like, fuck this, I'm moving on.
Yeah. Oh, no, yeah, you're describing the door that the coins go into.
Yep.
And then in the most classic of D&D fashions, the rooms, while they may not have specifically been tailored for each characters, the rooms now have a meaning to the players. But the players, in their ever wisdom, didn't actually pick up the coins in the order that they now have decided. So everybody's arguing over who has which coin and who's going to put which coin in.
It is such a... I think it ends up being described as a cutesy moment when they all swap coins like they're playing Pogs.
Yeah.
And they put the coins in at exactly the same... It is definitely a solid one of those D&D moments you have at home because nobody's listening to you guys bicker about coin colours and who has what. It's so beautiful and I love it. It's one of those like, aww. It's just one of those nice moments. I love it. I love it so much.
If this was like a written story, then like Balance would have picked up the green coin, Sultana would have picked up the red coin, and Ral would have picked up the black coin, and then they would all have symbolically taken their coin out, and you were supposed to think about the coin and what they represent in the connection to the characters. Yep. But in reality, Ral has red and green, and Sultana has black, I think. It's just like, oops.
It's something ridiculous, like just fucking around, grabbing shit. It's like, that's how you know that this is an improvised game versus a well-scripted drama, because it would have been the perfect moments. Like, don't get me wrong, the perfect moments are perfect, but also just like, it's not quite so real.
And they plunk the coins into the Intercrit door, and it slides open, and we see the... Don't give me that look. They see the armor stand and the mirror in this room. This is now known as the mirror room.
Do you want me to... I have notes for the mirror room.
Yes,
I have pages. I have like a good page and a half of notes for the mirror room, but specifically describing the mirror room. Mirror room. This will contain the empty armor stand and the mirror. When within the room, it goes dark and pale blue light fills the room. Fill my broken heart and I'll beat stronger than ever, whispers from the armor stand. Then the image of a shield, a crown, a rapier, a hammer, and a chalice will appear on the stand before it all vanishes. As you may have noted, I said none of those things.
Yes, none of that is...
opened the door to the mirror room. I described a square room and an armor stand, and then I stopped to contemplate for a second, and then things happened. So I didn't.
Players have no patience for your contemplations for intricate descriptions.
Yes, so I scrapped all of that, and I had to just roll with the punches. But that's the only description I have of that room, because a lot of the description actually lies in my separate notes about the overall group that is kind of responsible for separating and protecting all the individual pieces of Marnak and then putting them all back together. So all my notes about those are kind of contained in those, but I just didn't really read them because I felt comfortable enough about them. And then, you're not going to see the chalice. You don't need to know what that says right now. That's why the room is square-ish, I think, when I first describe it, and now it's a weird circular or hexagonal pattern. I don't really remember. It's changed. It's a mirror room. Like, who cares? It's changed slightly, and that's why.
Shut up.
It's a little different now, but that's why the beginning of this sounds a little awkward, because I kind of just stop reading my notes when things happen, because I'm like, that's more important. Let's just go with that.
I genuinely didn't pick up that you were stumbling at the description of the room, but then again, I may have been like a little bit too focused on other things.
Yeah, I can tell and I can hear it, and I remember feeling it, that when Sultana walks in is when I actually start getting really nervous, because I know what's coming up. And my brain is like, I'm gonna be doing some horrible things, I'm gonna do some imaging, I'm gonna be like freezing their characters in place, and I genuinely just get really nervous, because this is the big plot drop. This is the big kicking things in motion shit. Like the apocalypse starting, that meant nothing to me. This is where my brain focused of like, this is the heavy shit. So I start getting really nervous in this moment. Like they go in that room, I'm like, oh my god, everything's on fire.
Well, understandably so. You are about to try to predict or tell the players the path that their characters are going to take if they don't concentrate on their decisions. And that is really hard as a DM, because we don't actually have control over their players and the world around them.
Not at all.
It more plays second fiddle to their actions. So it is a very scary thing to do. It's one of the scariest things to do, is to give a player a prophecy. Because players are notoriously big dicks about prophecies.
Unpredictable elements within a creative environment. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's difficult, but I kind of just had to go from what I knew about the characters as they described, the way that they kind of begin to describe them. And I'd also ask them what they thought, like, the kind of end goal for the character might be at that point, I think. I just had a good idea on what I knew, because I'd already known what the final, and I still know the final scene of what this will be, what the big fight looks like. So I know how they're roughly going to get there. And the joys of prophecies and visions, of course, is like, hey, it might not be real. It might not come true. You might die, in which case, cool, then, it's an unfulfilled prophecy. So I don't have too much worry about whether or not all the things come to light or all the things come true, because I was kind of, when I structured them, I had, this is a positive thing, this is a heavy negative thing that has either happened or is going to happen, and this at the end is hope. It is the idea that you're not alone and that things can get better. Or if you like the path you took, then this can still be the ending, just in a slightly different way. So I kind of began to structure them a bit like that. And that's how I've structured Squash's mirror screen. That's how I structured Damaz's mirror screen. It's how I structured Fuck Your Bucky Pintor's mirror screen. So that's how I structure all of them.
All right. Just a real quick, before we get into the mirrors, because the mirrors are just going to lead into the end of the episode. Balance goes over to the armor stand, and the armor stand is clearly enchanted to translate itself to whatever language you most dearly hold to your chest. And it says, "Here rests Helya Slayer," or something along those lines. Did that word Helya come from anywhere, or was that just gobbledygook?
Nope. So each of the 6 items is written in a different language. Each of the items is different language, constructed differently, does different things. Each thing written on there are basically variations of this belongs to Marnak. And as we know, not every word translates literally one word for one word across different languages. So I used that idea, and being that, hey, this is Marnak. He was known as the Shade Slayer, Slayer made from shade. This is Lightbringer, whatever it is. They are all different variations on the same thing. Some of them sound positive and some of them sound negative, because that's actually who Marnak is. He is kind of both. He's a very strong, powerful person who does the overall greater good, but the individual pieces may be a little bit murkier. So each of the items have different names associated with Marnak, and obviously he got the Elven translation, which is Helya Slayer, which is from one of those online Elven speaking translator things. So I think I'd put in there all of them in Shade Slayer, I think is what I put all of them down as. And then if it didn't make sense, I just fucked with it until it sounded different.
Do you have in your notes Dragonborn version, Dwarven version?
Oh, let me have a look. I actually do.
Look at that, people. And she says he doesn't prep.
Oh, no, but this is the difference between world prep and session prep. So my world prep is pretty fucking heavy. Yeah, hang on, let me just... Relics, here we go. Okay, so because we've got them all now, and if you haven't caught up, you really shouldn't be listening. So the Hammer of the Righteous was written in Celestial because it belongs to Caesar, and it's Sans Linnea Shavazis, which is Shade of the Slayer. The Rapier, which is called Rebecca, is the aspect of dexterity. It's written in Orcish, and it's called Gretadesh, Slayer from the Shade. The Clockwork Heart is written in Dwarvish, aspect of Constitution. The alternative name is Heth Karach, Slayer of Shade. The Chalice of the Orator is Charisma, and the alternative name for that is Darkstalker because it's written in Common. Crown of the Reluctant Ruler, which is the aspect of wisdom, which is Helya Slayer, Slayer made of shade, written in Elvish. And finally, there is the Sect of the Shield, which is knowledge, which is intellect, which is in the language of Infernal, of Sim Viv Di Hechia, which is Shade Slayer. There you go. That's all my items.
Wow. Well,
so yeah, each of the items has an individual name that it will be known by, the language it was written in, or the people responsible for it, an aspect of, one of the 6 aspects that you have, or attributes that you have on a character sheet, have an alternative name of Marnak, whatever he's known as, any phrases associated, and the Order of the Sheltered, which is the Order of the Sheltered are the ones who actually look after the individual pieces and protect them, and are kind of supposed to be responsible for bringing them back. They also have descriptions with them. They also have special abilities written on them, and they also have a position on the little paper person that you put all the pieces of armor on, like Dolly. they also have those linked to them. So I have a whole effing range for that for Marnak. I don't have it for Kells because I do not intend for anyone to ever know what Kells' artifacts are.
Yes. I'm just going to say this now. When a piece gets returned to the armor stand, we'll go into all the details of the piece. I think that's a good point to go into it rather than trying right now to go through all the items. But thank you so much for reading that. That is really, really cool to know.
You're welcome.
All right. Let's move on to the mirror.
Oh, God.
We're at an hour mark. Do you want to cut the episode?
No, we'll just finish. Otherwise, we'll have to do like episode 9.5. Like we could just do the episode. It's fine.
I know. I was more meant as a heartache for anybody following along who really wants to know more of the mirror scenes. So we start with Sultana's mirror scene.
Yeah.
It starts with describing...
The DC for this is a wisdom 22.
Okay. So nobody was going to make it except maybe Ral.
Yeah. I set this difficult for a reason.
Yeah. So we start the thing with Sultana being seeing like a version of Odette and Odette's life and then death. Mm-hmm. She has her neck snapped. Is this how Sultana died originally?
Yeah, this is how Odette. This is what Sultana sees before Sultana is knocked unconscious. So her head whipping to the side and cracking, whipping to the side and cracking. And that's all that Sultana sees of this before she herself is knocked unconscious. I added in that she was dragged away because I wanted to drop that point. Hey, she's potentially still alive, ? And I want to say props to Neil through actually all the mirrors. Holy shit.
Yes.
Starts off with this beautiful Odette and Sultana theme, which I've spoken about before, and then it turns into something darker and sinister. I tried to make a mental note that whenever I portrayed Odette being killed, or the last memory that Sultana has of Odette, is that I try to describe them in the same way. So it'd always be a whip and a head crack and a whip and a head crack, and that's the last they'd see. I tried to make that the same. I don't know if I managed to nail it exactly, but that was my intention. So yeah, that's why that starts with this. It starts off with a happy memory of them being together, and then the shit drops.
Yes.
And then the question mark future continuing on with that.
Yeah, I had a little note that, like, basically you've answered. It is the, you see Sultana get dragged away by a mysterious force or an unseen force. At this point, you had kind of decided that Odette was somewhere.
Yep, I already knew where she was. I already knew she was alive. I already knew who had captured her. I already known what the point of that was.
From that, Sultana sees herself become this, raging inferno of fire, grabbing her greatsword by her hand and just starts slaying creatures indiscriminately.
Yeah, this is actually what happened. She went, as you would expect, on a rampage of revenge and started hunting down the people who had been a part of that fight on the side of Honorino. There being a brother and a sister dwarf. I think there was an elf involved, and obviously Honorino, and a halfling. There's a halfling involved. So yeah, she went down that path of absolute anger and vengeance, and it just never stopped. It only got temporarily halted by going to prison.
Yeah. So yeah, I assumed that you say you describe a female dwarf and a male elf, and it's those are characters. You have named for those characters and why they were slain, don't you?
Yep.
All right, I'm not going to push on that.
Some of them are in prison. Some of them have been killed. Some of them are still floating out wild in nature. There are I'm not going to push on that because
it hasn't come up yet in story exactly who these characters are, and I would much rather that Sultana talks about it than we talk about it here behind the curtains.
They may or may not be coming up soon in recording. We'll see.
Oh boy. And you described that she's swinging around this greatsword. Were you intending Callanmorn at this point?
No, I hadn't intended Callanmorn until I I think it's after episode 12, I think, when they're leaving the city to go off and do the search for the sect of the shield for knowledge, the shield. And then we take a break in recording, and then when we come back next time, I want them to have experienced like the Celestials basically walking the earth and causing chaos. It was at that point I decided that there was going to be like a sword and it was going to be sentient, and I hadn't really decided anything beyond that. Yeah, and then Calamorn comes up, and as soon as I voice Calamorn, I'm like, I know who has to voice this. That's got to be my friend Rethix. So, and that's how.
Were you just sitting there thinking what the classic like fantasy things are, and it's like, oh yeah, like a magical sword that like has a mind of its own. Ooh, these are like classic things.
No, it actually came from reading up about Valkyries. Like the Our Lore for Valkyries and the D&D Lore for Valkyries, and whatever textbook I'd ripped the Valkyrie stat block out of. I knew they had to be injured because otherwise they just nuke our poor level 3 or 4 players. And yeah, like they have imbued in their swords the souls of great warriors. So that gave me the chance to have a sentient weapon, and I'm like, oh, I could use that, and maybe someone could have this. Yeah, that's just. But we'll get a little bit more into Calamon and why he is the way he is if we ever get to that episode.
Yeah. We see Sultana just indiscriminately murder a bunch of people until the mirror is covered in blood and we can't see anything. And that's when her, like, there's like a little pinprick of light shining through, and that's where her friends manage to pull themselves in there. And they help calm the fire so that it doesn't burn as bright, as like intense, as uncontrollably as it is raging. Yeah,
uncontrollably was really what I was going for. Like, she has a right to her vengeance. She has a right to her anger. At this point, none of us knew she'd become the goddess of bloody vengeance, but that's the path we have basically, that's the path the character is taking. That's the path the character naturally evolved into. But at the point, I wanted it to be more controlled rather than just a blind lust for rage. And that was the hope that her friends were going to give her, is that no longer running around in a blind, burning, blood-fueled rage where you can't see anything except blood, being a little bit smarter about it, I guess. That was my hope that I was trying to convey in his.
The fire still burns in your eyes, but your body is made of embers, is, I think, almost the last thing you say.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and with that, we have that her companions are going to help her get what she wants, but in a more directed way. Yeah. In a more constructive way? I don't know. I don't know if you can call murder constructive.
It is for Sultana. It's one of those, like, coming to like craft this, I was like, I knew kind of exactly what I wanted to do, and I knew exactly what I wanted it to say, and I knew the iconography I wanted at the end. I know I wanted everybody's mirror to end with the 3 of them standing, looking back at whoever is looking at the mirror. That's what I wanted, and I managed to get that down eventually in this. Sultana's was the easiest for me to write because it is very, you have a righteous rage and you are fucking deserving of it. So that was one of the easier ones to write. It was the one that came to my head very quickly, and I just wrote it all down. I think probably within a few minutes of having thought about it. I used to work pretty much exclusively out of my garage for a long time, so I was always next to my computer. It was one of those, quick, open up the notepad, type, go back to what I'm actually supposed to be doing. Like, it was one of those.
Yeah. And following Sultana's mirror scene, we go to Ral. And Ral's is a little bit sparse compared to Sultana's, in my opinion. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it's more straightforward, it's more direct, it has a lot less, what do I say? Like, verbose, like, violence. It's more simple, it's more somber. It starts with Ral,
for
and
me
Emma
at least,
spending.
is more emotional.
Yes.
In a different way that Sultana's is emotional.
Angry emotional, sad emotional.
Yeah, his is very heart emotional, and this is very broken heart, because obviously I knew from before we'd even hit record that Ral was going to be the center of the cult of the brokenhearted, and I knew from the start that Bogrim, that motherfucker, was the reason for that. And I knew why Ama had died and how close she'd gotten to the truth. So yeah, the idea that the clockwork heart is there, I had to put that imagery in. I knew that I liked the idea of him being puppeted around by Bogrim, which is exactly what he did, which is why the hands are there, like why the strings are leading up to the hands above. Obviously, Ama had to be in it because that's his happy place, that's his happy start, and that's what we needed to have there. And yeah, the idea of breaking his heart like he's a puppet on a stage was just such beautiful imagery in my head. I did not want to mess or fuss with that, and that took a little while to come together, but I was very happy with the way that his turned out.
Yeah, you have it start with Ama standing before him, and then she like kind of bleeds away into a puddle of acid. And before she bleeds away, you have her say, "I'm so sorry, Raoul, I should have told you."
Yes.
The cult, Monarch, the end of the world. Everything
that she knew, she should have told him. She was very cognizant of the fact that Raoul can sometimes react strongly to information, and he didn't like the fact that she was constantly meddling with stuff anyway, and she didn't want to put him in danger. She knew that what she was doing was dangerous when she started to go down this, like, oh, what's this? What is this happening here? And her eventual suspicions about Bogrim, like, she didn't want to tell him yet in case she was wrong. She didn't want to tell him in case he got hurt. And as it was being, she should have told him. If she told him, he would not have been the sufferer. It would have kind of nullified that already, and that's why she was sorry.
Yeah. And then we have the string iconography. There are threads leading out of Raoul up to the hand, and then the hand pulls on all the strings, then the strings rip him apart, exposing his heart.
Yep.
And he's plunged into a dark place, but then two shadowy beings bring a beacon of light to help him see his way.
Yep, one was supposed to be a white light of basically purifying hope, and the other was supposed to be a very pale gold colour, which is why I went with yellow, because it's supposed to be bringing the light of his life back. I was trying to purposely not go, and Ama will come back to you in the end. Like, I didn't want to say that out loud. I had to be really subtle with it, so that's why one of them brings the pale yellow light. One is of healing, and one is of Ama.
That's good. Yeah, so, and that's Raoul's mirror scene.
Yep.
And then we have Balance wander over to the mirror and stare at it.
Well, all right. Let me tell you a small tale about Lafian's mirror. So I wrote Lafian's mirror, probably the second one that I wrote. I was like, bam, nailed it, boom. 15 minutes before we started recording, I was having what I call a pee epiphany, where you're taking a piss and suddenly everything becomes clear. And I saw in my head figures fighting on a chessboard. And I then saw like the mirror. I saw basically all the people dying, not all of them, but most of them dying and exploding in the same way. And I saw the rose gold crown, and I saw that when I was peeing, and I'm like, oh shit, I need to rewrite his mirror scene. So 15 minutes before we recorded, I rewrote the whole thing. I took literally every single information I had in there. I hit delete and I wrote his in 15 minutes. I'm like, boom, done. Whew. And that was partly why I was nervous, because I hadn't had time to think over it and read over it. I was like, nope, this is the epiphany. I'm going for it now. But that was, I don't know what was originally in there. I can't find the notes because Google Drive won't let me see back that far in my history. So it's only that set of notes in there. I don't know what was originally in there, but I know that it was shit compared to what finally came out. And when I was actually describing this scene, despite the fact I had just written it like 15 minutes before we started recording, I had my eyes closed through the whole thing as I was describing what I was seeing again. And I did that for pretty much both of the others too. Even though I'd read the notes, even though I knew what I was kind of encompassing, not looking at the notes meant that I could describe a little bit more fully what I was seeing in my brain. So that's kind of how Lafian's came about. And I don't know, man. There's so much symbolism written into Lafian's. Lafian is a very interesting character to me. There's a lot of potential, a lot of things for his character to grow about, and I try to fit as much in that there as I possibly could.
All right. Well, okay. Let's start with the beginning of Balance's mirror scene. He starts by seeing the lead up to Ninverna's passing. Yeah. And which is very similar to everybody else's. Like, there's a lead up to whatever, like, spiraled their life out of control. And my question is, then you follow it with everybody dying in the same way that Nirvana did.
Yeah.
What is there symbolism behind that, or is it just shocking iconography?
Kind of both, to be honest. So he was obviously very guilty about what happened to Nirvana, but he knows he has that sort of power, and he is very pissed at the people around him, the people who got him into this situation. Clearly has parental issues, clearly has issues with the Queen, clearly has issues with anyone that means he's been in prison and lost 50 years of his life. So I kind of wanted to show that anger, and obviously with him knowing he has the power to make people's head explode, I just wanted to put those together.
Good. That was a really good answer. There's nothing wrong with just shocking imagery. Sometimes you just want to do shocking things, but I'm glad there was more symbology behind that. After following that, you have him receive the rose gold crown.
Yep. That's the crown of the reluctant ruler. That's actually what that is.
Literally just the crown. Yeah, the crown he's been looking at his entire life.
Yep, the crown that his aunt has chosen to wear, even though it's not customarily worn by those of their lineage. It's chosen because it's an artifact of Marnak, and his aunt was controlled by Kells, and she found a way to subvert and crack that and have it within range of Dacian, when Dacian would eventually put together or nudge the people to put together the pieces of Marnak so they could have Marnak join their side.
So he gets the crown, and the crown starts turning his body to gold. It gives him a sword, an army, and what looks like a thirst for blood. My assumption here is clearly just power corrupts. Power corrupts. This is what he could become if he takes that crown, if he decides that's what he wants to do. But also, I was trying to show that there are other forces working through that crown. It's why at the end he can see his eyes and they're crying. The rest of his features are very different. They're not his. He's not wearing his face, somebody else's. And that is either Marnak or it was going to be Kells. That was kind of, I wanted to drop that big, like, hey, there's something wrong with this crown. Don't, guys, don't. That's kind of why I wanted to do that. Yeah, you like the crown has a double influence. It's both corrupting and literally magically corrupting.
Yes.
And you have this like really beautiful description of his face like contorted into a wicked smile as his eyes cry, but like his eyes really show the sadness. It's like, yeah, this is good shit. And then his companions come and they beat back his blows and push away the gold from his eyes and from his body and let him take control again. And he can wield the crown without the destructive nature of like the previous descriptions.
Yeah.
And yeah, so in all three of them in the first one you have the friends like quelling the fire and helping direct it. In the second one you have the friends bring light to the darkness and help direct him. And in the third one, it's friends come and in a weird way, like they support him and help him like take control.
Yeah,
it's a really really like well written. I like all of them. I like them all a lot. I wanted to really, especially with the friends turning up at the end, I really wanted to show that you can go certain paths alone, and maybe being the leader of all of this chaos is what you want in exactly that way, but things are often better when you have outside influences helping you or working with you or just making sure that you're not alone. When I decided that this was going to be Hope way back when I hung everyone and decided not to leave it on a shitty cliffhanger, that really influenced how a lot of these mirror scenes came out. Yeah. And that's the end of the episode.
2 notes. First of all,
yes.
So the other note that I wrote at the bottom of these 4 pages of notes for the prep on this session was, in all caps, Balance got a nat 1, deal with it. So he got a natural 1 for doing his wisdom save at this. at the mirror. And as though we don't really punish nat ones, I wanted to do something with it because I wanted to be able to like show something cool, so I could use that as a plot point to show history. So that's why I wrote the nat one thing. Otherwise, I'd forget that I had that idea in that moment. So there's that. And this is the point where I personally feel, and everything we've done so far had led up to this point of the mirrors, of showing them what this shit is, of how big the stakes truly are. This is where I feel the end of the introduction is over. Like, this is it. Yeah. This is done. We're now in the game. We're now in the thing. Boom.
It's the end of season 1. Pilot.
This is the end of the first chapter, the prologue, or whatever you want to call it. The 8-hour introduction episode. Like, like, this is for me. This is where I feel like we're starting the game. And that's why I was kind of like really nervous when we went into this room. I was like, oh boy, this is going to be the end. But yeah, for me, this is my hard, like, this is now where we start the game. I think that was... Nope. Other than that is... I wanted everyone to not feel alone. I wanted to hint at the fact that the three of them would make it to the end somehow. And then we had a mysterious fourth player turn up and ruin all my prophecies.
Your prophecies are still fine. Luckily, I the mysterious fourth player is a sneaky little bitch. That
really helps. If you had been a flamboyant bard, there's no way to have written you out of that shit. And I've been real screwed. But as it is, I'm lucky that my fourth player is a sneaky rogue and can be hidden in the background. I'm glad I didn't know at the time that we would have a sneaky thief turn up eventually, because current me would have written subtle nods to there being a small figure wandering around in the background somewhere. I would have made a nod to it somewhere in some of those. Which would have made better storytelling if you're reading this as a book or a TV. Like, why didn't they foreshadow that? But I'm glad I didn't know it at the time, because it keeps it focused on them and not like hinting the arrival of someone new. But as it is, you are an unseen, so I think your mirror scene, I have to hint at there being other people, and I have to change yours subtly. So, yeah, joys.
That's good. Do you have any notes or anything that you feel like I didn't bring up?
The death chair. That comes from an image from a song called Virgin State of Mind by Kay's Choice, which is in the Buffy soundtrack. There's a chair in my head on which I used to sit. I took a pencil and I wrote the following on it. Now there's a key. Yada, yada, yada. But that's why the death chair is what it is. That's it.
Okay.
That's all I wanted to put in there.
It's okay. It's okay. Like, thank you so much for adding that. Anything else?
Nope. I think that's it for me.
Yeah. I just want to make this note that, like, I have my notes for this episode, and they're like mostly timed just roughly when it happens, and my notes just stop being timed around 55, which is when we get to the Reaper and the mirrors, and more than half my notes are after that.
Yeah. There's a lot of icons and a lot of imagery in those mirror scenes. They're heavy. They're heavy, but I think some of the best stuff.
Yeah. And with that, I think we come to a close, unless there's something else you want to mention.
I don't think so.
No.
No.
Then anything except thanking you for listening. I'm going to leave everything else to outro Aethor, who I'm going to record in a couple of minutes. Do you have anything you want to say?
I love you, outro Aethor. You're doing the God's work.
Thank you so much for listening to the 9th episode of Beyond the Eclipse. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The only thing you really notice that this is an altar. And it's dedicated to Tyr currently.
It's an altar, and it's dedicated to Tyr currently.
Did I see the altar changing to Tyr?
Yes, you did, yeah.
Does Zoltana come out of the room for a moment?
All right. She walks out of the room.
Does it change back?
It changes back to being completely blank.
Balance takes a step in the room.
What god is he more inclined to?
I don't know. This was not something we really discussed.
It's your choice now.
Damn.
I don't fucking know.
Agma.
No.
Tiamat. Okay.
You know what? Why don't turn this into a plot hook maybe in the future. Pick something that you think the world would think a god would be like, this guy is interesting. Because I don't think there are any gods of psionics or anything like that, so that's not really an option.
Give me 2 seconds. I got the book. I just need to check his name.
Uh-huh.
You're getting
The thing is, I don't know.
You're getting that asshole trickster god right now is what's happening.
Mask?
It's that what the fuck is her name? The goddess of the spiders and shit.
Lolth? God, no.
Yes. Lol.
No, that's
Lol.
No. Lolth would never pick balance because I'm not a drow.
But we all know you're secretly a spider.
What?
I don't know.
Forgot.
I just needed to check the name.
Do not question me. I'm tired. I make no sense.
Before you, as you walk in, you see that. I'm trying to figure out how this works. You see the blank altar. You see that it becomes carved, and it seems to carve itself into, especially around the edges, carve into that of scrolls. But there's nothing written upon these scrolls. The ornaments themselves are ink, they are quills, and they are blank parchments.
That's very interesting. Balance is going to walk up to the altar.
Check. Can I also take a religion check?
Of course you may.
22.
I got an 11 somehow.
You wouldn't recognize this, unfortunately, Sultana, but Balance, you know this to be Ogma,
Ah!
Oh. All right.
which is the god
See,
of
I
knowledge.
knew he was the perfect one for balance.
Yep. I knew who he was. I just needed to make sure the name. I also knew that I'd have trouble pronouncing it if it wasn't in front of my face. So yes, you see Ogmas.
That's a rather peculiar... Well, no, I suppose it makes sense in my sense, though I've never been one for religion. Well, suppose I should take a look, and Balance is gonna take a look at the altar itself, see if there's anything that stands out to him.
Other than that they are carved blank scrolls, there is nothing that really stands out here.
Balance is going to... I don't want to say he does, like, a prayer or anything, but he, like, closes his eyes, does, like, a quick, like, mental nod, I guess, to the altar, and then leaves a gold coin on it.
Okay.
And then walks out.
You walk out, the altar returns to normal. The gold coin disappears.
Raul, would you like to step in and find your god?
Oh.
I'm actually rather curious. Please, indulge me.
Okay. Raul steps in.
Bahamut.
Kind of tiptoes in.
Are you fucking kidding me? Are you making me pick your gods?
No,
Seriously,
I'm not.
hang on. You've not thought of which god you follow.
Me? No.
Yeah, you, come on. You think about everything about this goddamn character. You tell me you haven't considered what god they follow.
Bahamut.
Maybe there's a
I
reason.
can't believe I'm the,
I had one for balance,
You don't-
but I don't...
No,
I'm
you
the
don't
only
have
one
to
that's
even pick one.
prepared.
Just give him Bahamut.
You don't have to give him shit.
Well, you're stepped into this room. What god are you more aligned to?
I'm not. He probably doesn't even know any.
It doesn't matter about you knowing. It's
Is there a
matter
god
which
of
one you're more
anxiety?
aligned to.
God of anxiety.
Oh, I've got it.
Bahamut.
Okay, I'm putting my book up.
It's gotta be Bahamut.
No, this is just the...
I mean, keep in mind, Rolando, like,
man.
people don't always pick their gods. In this kind of universe, the gods sometimes pick their people.
Yes, but it's the one that you're more...
Like, I feel like it's fair that Balance wouldn't know what god he really falls under domain-wise, because, like, he's not really religious.
Yeah, you've not picked one, but this is the one that has picked you.
Right.
It's the one that you're more...
In my goals are
You
in
would
line.
fall under. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I don't know if I want to pick the one that makes me giggle
Do it.
or pick the one that I think might be more appropriate.
Giggle. Giggle.
Tell me what both of them are, and I'll look and see. I'll help you.
Man.
I'm putting that down.
What?
That my god is apparently Ogma.
Ogma.
Oh, come on.
Ogma. Okay. All right, I will. Okay.
There really doesn't have to be anything that shows up on this altar. Just so you
That
know.
absolutely does.
Okay. All
Um,
right.
It's the room, Ral. It's magic.
No, this is
The
how.
room
Okay.
is magic.
You walk into this room, and the altar itself turns. It turns into a rack, a torture rack.
Ugh.
Ew.
There is blood all over it, and there is a pair of white gloves bound with a red cord.
Do I recognize that?
I'm gonna do another religion check.
Stop.
No.
Balance, you can take a religion check. Zoltana, you don't need one.
Why? Who is it?
You
17.
know this. This god is Ilmater. Ilmater is the god of endurance and self-sacrifice. You know this because this is the god that Adet followed.